Hi, welcome to the Noise Path. In this episode, we're going to take a look at another dumpster find. I found this little amplifier in the dumpster and it had a label on it that said it was broken. I cleaned it up so we can take a look at it. Now, it's not very likely that we can repair it, but we should still nonetheless be able to see how it is constructed and what it looks like on the inside and what the theory of operation is. Now, despite the fact that this is a 20 gigahertz amplifier, I think it's probably at least 20 years old. And this is an SHF 100 CP. We've actually looked at SHF components before. We've done extensive analysis on the dies they have made. This particular one is made of a gallium arsenide FET amplifier device, probably is multiple stages. The performance is reasonable. 7 dB noise figure supports better than 28 picosecond of rise time. That's 20 dB of gain, and it can put out almost half a watt at the output, so it's not too bad. From a single 15-volt power supply, so it must have some bias generation internally, as these GaAs devices require multiple power supplies. So we'll have to see how it is operated. Now, with 20 dB of gain, it would have been nicer if this had a little bit more gain, because if you want to hit 27 dBm, you're going to still have to put 7 dBm into it, which is not insignificant. But I think for some data communication and creating some nice eye diagrams, this would have been a nice component to have at a time, at least to about 20 gigabit per second or so. We should try it quickly to see if it really is broken, and then we can take it apart, look and see how the bias generation is done. If we're lucky, the problem is in the bias generation, which is fixable, but if the problem is, for example, a damaged input of the FET amplifier, that's going to be a goner. But nonetheless, we should be able to look at the cool construction it has. We can get a really quick idea to see if this is working by measuring some S parameters. Now, I don't even need to calibrate the network analyzer to see if this is alive, because I'm not going to make any precision measurements. I just want to see if it has any gain or if it's doing anything. Now, the state of this amplifier is essentially unknown, and it can put out 27 dBm, so we have to be very careful when connecting it to any instrument. Always add an attenuator in these situations, not to mention that 27 dBm is over the maximum input range of the Keysight E5071C, which is 26 dBm for damage level, so definitely attenuation is needed. This is a 30 dB attenuator. It doesn't go to 20 gigahertz, but again, we don't care. We just want to see what happens. So I have port 1 connected to the input, I have port 2 connected to the output of the attenuator, and then we have a power supply, which is going to give us 15 volts to the amplifier when I turn it on. So let's see if it does anything. So here we are trying to measure S21, and I have set the stimulus power of the network analyzer to minus 10 dBm, and that's to ensure that we're not going to saturate the amplifier in case it is working, because it has 20 dB of gain. Now, we're not applying any power to the amplifier itself, so S21 is really small, minus 70 dB. That's because it has good isolation when there's no power. Let's turn on the power to the amplifier, 15 volts, and wait a second. That actually doesn't look bad. I don't understand. So we actually do have some gain here. Remember, there's a 30 dB attenuator in front of this, so when you're measuring minus 30, you have to add 30 on top of that. So there's definitely gain close to where it's supposed to be. I am now puzzled of why this was labeled as not working. The drop that you see here towards the end is partially because of the cables. Again, I haven't even calibrated because I wasn't expecting this thing to do anything. But it seems quite flat up to 20 gigahertz. After calibration, there's a little bit of drop here, so now I'm really puzzled of why it was labeled as not working. I was looking forward to destroying it and seeing what's inside. We're still going to look at what's inside of it, but we can't look at the die if it's working. I don't want to destroy a 20 gigahertz amplifier, but now we should do more testing on it and see if it's perhaps not meeting all of its specifications. Okay, so it looks like we need a more serious setup. So we're going to use the FieldFox 50 gigahertz analyzer here. If you haven't seen the review of this instrument, I highly recommend it. This thing is like an RF bench that's portable. And here at the amplifier, again, in the back, I have changed the attenuator to a 20 dB attenuator with much higher quality, 26.5 gigahertz of bandwidth, which should be more than enough. Power supply is exactly the same. Let's see the response now. So everything is now calibrated. Input power is minus 15 dBm. We're looking at S21 over here. We're looking at the phase of S21 here, so we can see if there is any unusual group delay problems there. Let's turn it on. And, well, look at that. I mean, it looks a little ripply. It certainly does have a bit variation, but we're looking at a 2 dB per division scale here, so it's pretty narrow. Looks like we have about 20 dB of gain like we expected. Remember, the attenuation is now 20 dB. It does drop around 14 gigahertz, almost to its 3 dB bandwidth, but then it goes back up again. And then it looks like that the 3 dB bandwidth is definitely more than 20 gigahertz, and this amplifier is supposed to do that. The phase response looks pretty linear. This is not group delay, but it looks reasonably good. I wonder if this ripple is normal. I don't know what the original response should be, but it doesn't look terrible. Now, one way to really understand if it's working or not is to put it through a large signal eye diagram test, because that's going to reveal everything, at least for something like this. And we can see if it's producing really nice eye diagram, because it should have very good rise and fall time and almost no ISI. So let's give that a try. So here's our setup to verify the large signal broadband response of the amplifier. We're going to use the BERT over here to generate that data. We're doing 10 gigabit per second, 300 millivolt peak-to-peak signal going in, single-ended of course. Then going into the amplifier, I've put the attenuator 20 dB back again because the output of that is going into the remote sampler. This thing has 70 gigahertz of bandwidth, so it's not going to limit anything, but we have to be super careful. If you put too much signal into this, you will destroy this and it would be quite bad. And then of course we are sampling and displaying it here. We have also the precision time base directly connected, so we're getting as good of a measurement as possible in terms of the jitter. We can enter the attenuation into this software so we can see the actual signal level right here at the output of the amplifier. This is a broadband signal, PRBS 15 going in. Let's take a look at the eye diagram. And well, the eye diagram looks okay. I mean, it's not the greatest eye, but part of that is just a performance limitation of the bird producing this, but it's completely open. And you probably can't read these numbers very well, but the rise time is around 45, 46 picosecond, but it's putting out 4.5 volt peak-to-peak signal into this through the attenuator. So it's generally producing the 27 dBm or so that it is promised to do. And it is at 10 gigabit per second. Jitter is about 2 picosecond RMS. So as far as I can see, it looks fine. I don't see any major problem with it. If you had a better source, we would probably get even a better eye diagram out of it. But certainly that label, maybe somebody was making a mistake. We're still going to take a look inside of it, of course, but I think the amplifier is functional. So you may be wondering what happens if you connect this directly to the bird, both at the input and the output, and try to analyze the bit error rate using the amplifier. Of course, these eyes are completely open, so we're going to get a really good result, but I think it might be worthwhile to checking it out. So the signal into the amplifier is exactly the same as before, 10 gigabit per second. It says here that it is 600 millivolt peak-to-peak, but we're only using one of the outputs, so single-ended, so it's half of that. The pattern is 2 to the 15 PRBS. Now I have looped back the clock from the output to the input of the bit error rate tester, and it's doing a detection of that. It's not using the built-in clock and data recovery to figure this out. Now we can analyze a whole bunch of things about the eye diagram. So if you go into the analyzer, over here, we can go into the output timing, and you can see that the bathtub curve is pretty open. So the threshold here is 10 to the minus 6 bit error rate. We have a lot of margin. Shouldn't surprise us. We saw that on the oscilloscope that these eyes were quite open. We can also do the same thing on the vertical opening. Same threshold, 10 to the minus 6. We have about 400, 450 millivolt of eye opening at that bit error rate, which is also reasonably good. Again, we should not be surprised by this result. It's going to get harder and harder, of course, at lower bit error rates. You can adjust that. But you can also analyze the eye opening as well. We can actually run another analysis. It's been running for some time. It's going to go through it and give us this contour. And the bit error rate is 0. And within this black area, we're sitting at 10 to the minus 12, essentially. And this looks very much like what we saw on the oscilloscope. The difference here is that this is plotting it as a function of bit error rate. Now, I've never done a full tutorial on bit error rate testers, but if that's something of interest, it could make a good video. I did repair this instrument on the channel, but I don't think I ever talked in details about how the various functionalities of the bit error rate tester work, particularly things like jitter tolerance and so on, which we're not running on this because this is not a clock and data recovery system. But nonetheless, if you're interested in that, let me know. And here's what's inside of this amplifier. Clearly all handmade. It is quite old and custom made, obviously, so they make them per order essentially. So here's the input on the left side, and you can see it comes in. There's a triple bypass capacitor here, just AC coupling, and we do see 2 mimics, and these 2 mimics make up a 2-stage amplifier, so each of them probably have about 11 dB of gain or so, 20 gigahertz of bandwidth, and these are gallium arsenide FETs, and they themselves internally could be multi-stage amplifiers. They could even be distributed amplifiers. Unfortunately, we can't know unless we take it and destroy it, which I don't want to do because it is essentially a working amplifier. Now after this, you can see that they're not doing anything to the RF pad, so this is the output on the other side, and they're leaving everything alone, so all the biasing is done from around the chip, not directly on it. There could be some direct connection internally we cannot see, but nonetheless, they still need really broadband biased and choke RF networks in order to be able to make this work, and that is indicated by all these various inductors that you see around. The multi-stage inductors, like here, you can see here's 1, 2, 3, and then goes over here, and there's 4, and there's 1 more. This is how you get a really broadband DC bias at RF. If I were to just use a really large inductor right on the RF port, not only the large capacitance of this would load that node, it would certainly not have the broadband response. It would resonate quite early on. So by doing this, you get this broadband response. We've seen this when we looked at biased. They do exactly the same thing to give you a really nice broadband RF performance here, and at the same time this thing works all the way down to 100 kilohertz, and that's determined by these capacitors as well as the internal structure of the amplifiers and all the biasing around it. There's nothing unusual. There's some diodes in here probably for protection. Everything else is just passive resistors and so on for biasing, and the biasing comes from the other side of the board through these little tiny wires. You can see one here, one here, and then this is the power coming in. So the power coming in is decoupled to the ground, but then it goes on the other side of the board. I'll show you that in a second. Yeah, nothing else unusual really going on. Pretty simple from that point of view. The thermal management is done on the other side as well, which we will see. So if I flip this to the other side, here's our voltage regulator. So the power comes in, there's some diode in case you reverse bias it, 12-volt regulator, not too bad, and then it goes in onto this little circuit. And the job of this circuit is just to create various analog voltages to feed all those GaAs FET devices. And they go through 1, 2, and 3, so we don't have to really worry about what voltages those are. But here's the little plate. So this plate is where one of the dies sits on, and the other one is underneath here. You cannot see it. And that's how they do the thermal. So they take this little plate, they put the die under, they epoxy glue it down thermally, and then they bring everything together, and then they drop it in. And this is all soldered or epoxied down for good thermal management. This thing does get warm despite having such large heat sinks around it, so it certainly burns a lot of power in there. Not the most efficient amplifier. But yeah, it looks really nice inside, totally custom made because these are made as you order them. Here's the output. Somebody has scratched in serial numbers and so on as they've worked on this individually, all handmade. If we can obviously follow this and figure out some of the biasing, but there's nothing unusual going on. It's too bad that it is working, otherwise we could have destroyed it. We could have seen what's underneath this. I can't focus any more on that on this microscope, but yeah, there's the package there. Looks really nice. There's even little tiny scratch marks here. I wonder what the connection is internally underneath this. If it's wire bonded or flip chipped, I would say it's most likely wire bonded given the age of this thing. Yeah, pretty cool. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this quick video looking at this SHF 100 CP amplifier. I know that we really wanted to look at a die, but hopefully will be another one broken where we can analyze the ASIC as well. Let me know what you think in the comment section. See you next time.